you unless you're dead or dying.
I find this TikTok here and a lot of the other responses that have gone with it to be deeply relatable. And part of it talks about problems that women specifically have had with the healthcare system, and that's not something that I can really speak on because I present myself as male and nobody thinks I'm a woman when they hear me talk or see me. But I'm a chronically ill medical professional. I'm a certified medical assistant and an emergency medical technician, soon to be advanced EMT once I take my practical board. And even though I've seen doctors that I feel are generally competent doctors, I've still had to figure out a lot of things myself that they could not figure out. When I was a child, 2-3 years old, I started having really extreme meltdowns where I would scream for up to an hour at a time and be completely inconsolable. My mother, who has a bachelor's degree in child development and who worked in a psychiatric long-term facility for children teaching them school, was unable to make heads or tails of the behavior that she saw. When I started going through the first series of growth spurts that school-age children tend to go through, I was extremely thin and lanky, and I got super winded in a way that other kids just did not when doing sports or jogging or anything like that. The behavioral problems that I had persisted. My mother was concerned about the possibility of Marfan syndrome, so she took it to our family doc, who at the time she kind of wrote it off as if it was nothing. But then she measured my arm span and compared it to my age and my weight and my height and was like, what on earth? That does not look normal. So I saw a pediatric cardiologist, and all I remember having done was an echo where they look at your heart with an ultrasound, and they never did any genetic testing to look at Marfan or anything else, any other connective tissue disorder. No routine blood work, nothing. Not long after that, I started having UTI symptoms where I was pretty much constantly in pain and constantly felt like I had to go to the bathroom, no matter whether my bladder was actually full or not. I went through multiple rounds of antibiotics and still had problems, and our family doctor kind of wrote it off again. Our family doctor wrote that off again, even though it was not normal. No blood work. She didn't even do a urine culture. If I'm dealing with a patient that has UTI or STD-like symptoms, I'm probably going to get a urine specimen from them before a provider even orders it. My mother stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning combing through research literature and finally found something about UTIs caused by group B strep. I was put on an antibiotic for that, and a couple days later I finally had gotten in with a pediatric urologist. I started taking an antibiotic for that and started getting better, but we saw a pediatric urologist because I had already gotten in with one. And even he didn't suggest a urine culture. They did a bladder ultrasound and said, he's dry as a bone. And then I sat up and was like, I have to go to the bathroom. And he was like, what? And I basically strained really hard for a couple minutes and was able to get out 1 drop of urine. Again, no blood labs or even urine labs were suggested. After that, my behavioral problems got substantially worse. I was having meltdowns all the freaking time. I basically said and did whatever the hell I wanted, no matter how destructive it was to myself or other people, and no form of discipline got my attention or made me want to change my behavior. And after I recovered, once we did that last round of antibiotics that worked, I had extreme emotional problems that were much worse than before that. I had sensitivities to sounds and sights and textures and other things that got much worse and weren't really explained by the fact that I was autistic. Still got winded easily, and every time I stood up, basically I just about passed out. I got really dizzy, and one time I even passed out in the shower one time and hit my head on the faucet in the shower. Then starting at like age 11 or 12, those behavioral problems got worse. I said and did things that were really dark and disturbing and sexually inappropriate, especially for a child of that age who has not had those things suggested to them by somebody that abused them or by watching pornography or something else like that. I just came up with them on my own. And along with his behavioral problems just continuing to worsen, I was just chronically exhausted from age 11 or 12, almost never had any energy, never woke up feeling rested. I was so picky about foods, and I would eat a lot of something I liked when I could get it, but otherwise I just stayed super skinny all the time because I thought 99% of food and most of the stuff my family liked to eat just tasted like crap. To get through school each day was a struggle because I didn't physically feel okay. I didn't feel mentally okay. We tried a few meds, tried some supplements. Any minimal or basic lab work that was ever done never seemed to show anything that was significant. I was seeing a counselor for the behavioral problems who even specialized in autism. She thought a lot of this stuff just went back to autism and anxiety. And it got to the point that at age 15 to 19, I started having just complete emotional meltdowns every day. Physically, I was not okay because I was always exhausted and anxious, and mentally, I literally wanted to murder every fucking body in my family all the time, every day. I literally just did not do it because I knew I would go to jail. Otherwise, I would have done it if I could have gotten away with it. And the thing about this was nobody could ever figure out what the hell was wrong with me, mentally or physically. And it was a miserable existence. I started finally getting on the path to answers when I started taking some psychology classes when I was dually enrolling in high school. This didn't really speak to the physical problems, but mentally I obviously clearly had symptoms of mood disorders and also narcissistic and psychopathic personality pathology, because the way that I loved or cared about people was superficial and limited, and guilt or remorse was just something that I had literally never felt ever. I did not care about the impact my actions had on other people. I did not care about their feelings or sensitivities or anything like that. And then my mother learned about a condition. It's called PANDAS, which stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorders Associated with Streptococcal Infection. Essentially, you have autoimmune brain damage that occurs in response to strep infections, and I had a group B strep UTI for 6 months of my life when I was 6 or 7 years old. My behavioral problems and mental health really came to a head, and I finally got on some medication that just was able to calm me down so I could just relax and have some peace of mind. But even after that, I had physical symptoms that was troubling. I was chronically exhausted. I'd been on so many antidepressants. I had multiple types of brain stimulation and even had treatment with esketamine and ketamine. I had some imaging done at the Amen clinics in Atlanta that showed that I have frontal lobe brain damage. My frontal lobe is flat rather than rounded off. And we connected this to me being hit in the head really hard as a kid by this other, when I was 2, maybe 3, when this kid just drop kicked a basketball and hit me in the forehead at point blank range, and then I went up in the air and then the back of my head hit the floor, and there's evidence on those scans of those injuries, even though I didn't have any neurological symptoms at the time. And it also showed shit blood flow in a lot of my brain and not enough brain activity in the important places and way too much in the wrong places. After being chronically fatigued for so long and that being blamed on depression and all these other things, I saw some physical problems in the brain, not just, neurotransmitter imbalances that showed why I might be having some of the problems I had. But after having meds and so many different types of treatment, the chronic exhaustion, the struggle to get through every day, just having no energy or motivation or enthusiasm, just was not fitting with the idea that it was just depression, as well as some chronic gastrointestinal problems and pain and all these other symptoms that kind of seemed to span multiple types of body systems that were very debilitating. I saw a cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, an endocrinologist, and then just last year I'd known about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome for a while, but we realized that a lot of problems that I've had and symptoms I've had actually match up with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And finally, at 26 years of age, last year, I got in with a geneticist who diagnosed me. Well, really, I finally got in with him in January of this year. Got in with a geneticist who diagnosed me with hypermobility spectrum disorder, which is really thought to be a less severe presentation of hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And so many of this cacophony of problems that it took 2 decades to figure out, 2 decades of misery. A lot of that I had to figure out on my own by being a medical clinician, and my mother had to help us figure out because none of the fucking doctors could help us, even the ones that wanted to. Our system is fucked. And even people like me who care about our patients and want to help our patients, do everything we can to help our patients, or, doctors or providers who feel the same way, the system makes it so damn hard to do the right thing by our patients. It should not have taken a 17-year-old child, essentially, to start piecing this stuff together and finally get it all figured out by age 26, and then his mother for decades feeling helpless on how to help her child to figure out all of this stuff and to get me on the right track. We have to push for change in this disgusting profit-driven healthcare system. It has to change.